And the U of M students will be getting a credit for it as a mini course. And we have community members who come from 5 classes at least who get a certificate that says that they participated in the University of Michigan Detroiters series, which I tell you one day is really going to sell well on eBay. Okay, so here we go. Here we have our incredible panel. We have Athena Andrews, who was the principal of Catherine Ferguson Academy, and she's going to be talking to us about that this evening and helping demystify some of what happened and why that school is now closed. Let me just mention up front, all 3 of our panelists are native Detroiters. They've been teaching or been in the school system themselves for quite a while. We have Linda Spike, who was a former, and Athena was the principal at Catherine Ferguson. We have Linda Spike, who was the principal at Mumford High School. And she's going to talk to us about that experience, which is going to get us into, I think it's going to trip us into our TFA discussion, Teach for America discussion. And then we have Yolanda Peoples, who's a parent. Her daughter went to Detroit School of the Arts, and we're going to learn. Okay. And I think our conversation with her is going to get us into self-governance and some of the other issues that many of you expressed in your questions. See tools online. So and then I've got a couple questions I'm going to ask, and then we're going to throw it out to the audience. Okay? So are we ready?
Ready.
Hello.
Hello.
So when you leave here today, you should be smarter than you were when you got here, because smarter is what you get, not what you are. That is, wow, I wish you'd have gotten that kind of response every day at the school. That's the way I open the morning announcements every morning, because if you don't get smarter by the time you leave at the end of the day, why are you here? So Catherine Ferguson Academy started off as a small program in a Salvation Army building with about 20 girls who lived in residence who were all in foster care. And that program had been going on for some years. And they had, in the 60s, sometime in the 60s, they talked somebody in Detroit Public Schools into allowing them to have Detroit Public School teachers for those 20 kids. And then they got a few more kids, and then people who were planning a place for adoption. It's a school for pregnant parenting teams. Did I say that part? So it was a school for pregnant, only for pregnant girls at that time, because you had to leave after you had your baby. Then anybody who was planning a place for adoption or were in regular high school and were asked to leave and lived in that part of town, which is on Fort and West Grand Boulevard, came to Catherine Ferguson Academy. Then one day this woman called me and said, hey, there's this little program over there. Would you be interested in going to start a school? And I used to be an art teacher, so when I got there, the best part is that the building had stained glass windows, and I was going, who would want to have school in a building with stained glass windows? But I didn't really know anything about pregnant or parenting teens, but I was working on a PhD at this little blue school called U of M. And so I changed my focus and started to spend more time learning about it. And one of the key things about parenting for me is if you're going to be somebody's mother, you need to be able to feed your baby no matter what. I was also a part of a kind of revolutionary time, and I actually thought the revolution was going to happen and that you needed to be self-sufficient so you could grow enough grains to make your own flour, and you could know how many animals you needed to kill to live, and how you could get complex proteins for them. So we started a garden at the school. When we got put out of the Salvation Army, we got put out of the Salvation Army because the principal was kind of stupid, and she was trying to convince this lady who was a statistician at the school that they said we could only have 125 girls, which took them from 40 girls when we started to 125. And so I joke with them that the Salvation Army goes around and picks people up off the street and they put us out. We moved to the building on Selvin after a huge campaign with the school district. Since I was an art teacher, I put like these 10-foot ghosts in the school center building with signs. The school then was called Booth because everything in the Salvation Army is called Booth. So I put these big ghosts that said, "Booth needs more space." And I sent invitations to the superintendent for childbirth classes, for breastfeeding classes, for gardening. Everything we did in the school, we sent. I tried to bribe the superintendent's driver once to bring him to the school so he could see how small it was. 3 days before Christmas, they said, "Here, just take this building." But they moved us in with the bad boys and the expelled students, which really speaks to what we think about girls in education. And like robbing a liquor store is about the same as having a baby in many people's minds. So when you have a school for pregnant parents and teens, it's very. When I first started the school, there were 77 schools in the United States. There are now 2. So anyway, our garden went from a garden to a farm because we had some rabbits, and the rabbits had babies, and the babies were a horse, and the horse had babies, and that was a goat, and the goats had babies, and those were chickens. And by the time it was over, we grew every vegetable that grows in Michigan, and we had every farm animal you could think of. I remember getting to school one morning, and kids said, "Sandra, you gotta go find the horse," and I'm like, "Baby, I'd be hard-pressed to go find you." So then I go find the horse, and I'm driving back with this horse lead through my window. Because I am just stunned at how important it is for city kids to learn about animals and gardening. Really, even the little cute girls would bring extra shoes and things for the days that they were going to milk the goats. So we had a pretty illustrious school. We had 100% college admission. We had a 0 dropout rate, depending on how you calculate it. So for regular schools, they calculate a dropout rate from 9th grade cohort through. For pregnant parenting teams, you could come at any point when you got pregnant, so you wouldn't start in 9th grade. I wish, this doesn't sound bad, but I wish everybody gets pregnant in 9th grade, so then you have 4 years in as opposed to getting pregnant in 10th grade. So the National Association for Secondary School Principals did a statistical analysis of our girls and said that we had a 98% graduation rate, but that was based on 11th to 12th grade group because that was the kind of largest cohort we had. Our test scores weren't great, but our kids were, a requirement for our school was that you had to be accepted to college before you could graduate. So everybody was accepted to college. And I get these letters every now and then saying, well, they're not really ready. You know, we've had some presidents that weren't ready to be in college and they were presidents. So it is real clear to me that we put limits on other people's children that we wouldn't put on our own. So that was the expectation we had for our girls. We were very much opposed to charter schools. It was like charters were the enemy. Go away, you evil charters. You're just trying to take us out. And then we became a charter because the Detroit Public Schools closed us. They said we were too expensive and it was not an important enough. Don't get me started on what they said. Anyway, they closed us, and then on Wednesday I hated charters. On Thursday I was a charter. There is some discussion out in the community, I guess, among some people that the reason we closed was because of our, what do they call them now? But the people who had more money, the administrative people, Blanche Kelso Bruce, that is not the case. We just could not recover from all the publicity that we got when the school closed. That we kept losing kids. There was also, we adopted a program called Big Picture Learning, which is a program that incorporates a required internship for 4 years. And we got some pushback from some people who were in our school because, and you'll hear about some other programs I think tonight, that we really did not take the time that we needed to roll that in. But we didn't lose students. We lost about 5 kids because of that. But we never, our peak enrollment was 460 some years. But again, it just depends. And there's, for pregnant parents and teens, there's really no way to know who's going to get pregnant, like over the summer, or how many. And so we couldn't anticipate a student body, but we weren't required to meet the same teacher service kinds of formulas because my colleagues would keep their girls until after count day, and then they would go, "Oh, you're 8 months pregnant? I didn't see you yesterday. Were you pregnant yesterday?" And they would send them to us. So we had a uniform funding and staffing. And then when CPS said that they were going to close us, that's all girls heard. They never heard, but it's going to be open as a charter. And we just could not get that turned around. I'm on the board of trustees at Olivet College, and I spent half a day today talking about recruitment and retention. 1,000 fewer students graduated from high school this year in Michigan. And by 2020, we will have reduced the number of students who are graduating by 25%. So if I could get those girls who didn't, there are about 2,000 kids in Detroit that get pregnant in high school age every year. I can't find a way to identify who those girls are, because when they drop out of school, they don't say, "I'm dropping out because I'm pregnant." They just don't go. Kids don't really drop out, and this is the last comment I'm going to make. Kids drift out. They drop in, and then before you know it, they aren't going anymore. So when we get to the questions, if you have more questions about Catherine Ferguson, I'm glad to answer.
Good evening. As stated earlier, I am a retired principal from Mumford High School, and I'm not really going to talk about Mumford as it was. I mean, Mumford was a storied high school. We had so many people who graduated from Mumford High School, so many luminaries, but I'm really going to talk about it as it relates to the EAA, or the Educational Achievement Authority. I retired from Mumford in 2009. And for 2 years after I retired, Mumford still remained a Detroit public school. And as Asia had said, in regards to her school, our test scores weren't that great, but our students were performing and they were doing great things. In 2011, in June of 2011, Governor Snyder made an announcement that he would be creating a new district called the EAA, the Education Achievement Authority. And this district would encompass the 5% of the lowest performing schools in the state. He made that pronouncement at Renaissance High School in June. In August of 2011, he hired a Chancellor, John Covington, from Kansas City, Missouri schools. And you would think, let me stop for a minute and say that I am acutely aware that reforms and changes needed to and still need to be made within the educational arena. But I'm also aware that we don't want our students in Detroit to be used as guinea pigs in order to further that goal. So, in August of 2011, he hired John Covington as the chancellor. And John Covington allegedly had all this expertise in turning around schools. But he really left Kansas City under a cloud because he led people to believe that members of the board were conspiring to push him out. But they later found out that rather than pushing him out, that he had been interviewing in Detroit and had accepted the job as a chancellor. he had instituted some reforms, but did not stay long enough to see if those reforms came to fruition. And in fact, the school district became unaccredited after that. When he got here in December, Roy Roberts, who was the emergency manager of Detroit Public Schools, helped to select the schools that were going to go into the EAA. Now, if you recall, I said before that the EAA was supposed to be a reform district for the lowest performing schools in the state. But when the EAA was initiated, all the schools in the EAA were Detroit Public Schools. So right away, the premise was not followed. In December, Covington went around to the schools to talk to the community, to let them know what was going to happen and how the school district was going to improve the lives of students. But I was at several of those meetings, and although Asina said when you come, you should leave smarter than when you arrived, we weren't any smarter. We knew very little about what was going to happen with the EAA when we left. To be fair, they were building the plane and flying it at the same time. Because remember, this was December of 2011. He had just been hired in August. He was just talking to parents and communities in December. The school district began in June of 2012. So that means, 6 months or so to have curriculum, to hire staff, to get appropriate principals, to try to retain students. All of this had to be done. So I think it was an impossible task, but had people who were not necessarily capable of completing the task at the beginning. Some of the problems, and I could talk about this all evening, so I won't. I'll give you what I think were some of the problems, and then maybe during questions and answers, you'll have some others. But one of the problems is, for example, the principals were supposed to be vetted through Harvard University. So if you wanted to be a principal in the EAA, you had to fill out the application online, and Harvard University is who vetted your application. No one locally, no parents, no community members had an opportunity to interview or have any say-so in what people became principals of the schools. And as you may or may not know, probably some of you may have been in the category, you can be very, very smart, very, very intelligent, but that doesn't mean that you can run an urban school. Right. So within the first year, 3 or 4 of the principals were released. Also, one of the other problems was throwing out the baby with the bathwater. They really did not want to utilize some of the things that did work in Detroit Public Schools because there were many, many things that did work. There were many people who were outstanding within the Detroit Public Schools, but they really did not want to hire any of the veteran teachers or many of the veteran administrators. And so they began the school year with a lot of neophytes. And all of us began as young people, so I have no problem with starting very young and working your way up. But I also know that when I started teaching, there were veterans there that I could go to give me some assistance and to tell me how it is that I needed to navigate this thing called education. A lot of Teach for America were hired, very passionate, very enthusiastic, but not enough support for them to make sure that they were able to complete the job. And so many of them, there was a high turnover of teachers during the year. The school district was touted as having longer school days and longer school years. But at least in the high schools, the school day was the same. It was the same amount of time. It was no longer. And the school year, just to show you how planning was not done properly, they did not make allowances for graduating seniors when they were planning for the school year. So the school year was to go from September all the way through August. But as you know, and many of graduating seniors have to go attend summer school where they have summer programs. And so they did make allowances. And instead of coming up with a new kind of schedule for those graduating seniors, they had an aha moment. And so in June, they just said, okay, well, you can graduate, which means that they didn't get the benefit. They left 5 weeks earlier. So they did not get the benefit of the education that they should have received. That was the first year. And in the second year, they still had not done anything with that problem. So, and also, the young people, underclassmen, 9th through 11th graders, because you have a district within a district, because the EAA was actually within the Detroit Public Schools, when Detroit, when Detroit Public Schools left in June, because that was the end of the year, many of the EAA students decided they were going to stay home as well. And so the principals had to come up with activities to retain the students, to make them want to come to school, but that didn't have any impact on the educational excellence that they were trying to promote. I have just rings and rings. I brought, I didn't bring enough, but I'm going to leave this. These are some websites where you can learn more about the EAA and its critics. It's not just me or some of the parents or some of the others. Eastern Michigan University is trying to, the staff is trying to convince the school to pull away from the EAA. Michael Flanagan, the EAA had an exclusive contract as a turnaround district in this area. Michael Flanagan has terminated that contract. Not terminated the EAA, but saying that other groups can come in and be turnaround specialists within that arena. Representative Lipton, through the Freedom of Information, Michael Flanagan is Superintendent of Schools for Michigan. Representative Ellen Lipton, as through the Freedom of Information Act, has numerous documents that she has that show some of the things that have gone right and wrong with the EAA. And you can look on InsideTheEAA.com for all those documents. Electoblog has done interviews with teachers, staff, current teachers and teachers who have left, TFAs and some veteran teachers, a few that are there. Those interviews are online. Excuse me, I'm catching a cold. Online, which sort of discuss some of the problems that the EAA is having. My biggest problem, and I'm going to end this, my biggest problem with the EAA is not that it was trying to do something different, but that it didn't do it in a systematic, analytical way. That they threw in staff, they threw in a curriculum, they didn't follow normal procedures, they used a whole generation of our children as guinea pigs.
Yes.
And the data, if you look at the data, Thomas Pedroni, who was Wayne State University professor, has analyzed the data to show that the students have actually regressed from being in the Education Achievement Authority. So I'm going to turn it over. If you have questions, I'll be able to answer your questions and further discuss it in a little bit.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Peoples. I'm a parent of one graduate from DPS and a current DPS student. He currently attends Spain Elementary Middle School, but I am here to talk about the Detroit School of Arts, which used to be the Detroit School of the Performing Arts, created by Dr. Denise Cotton, and it was always an open application school, which always met AYP, always had attendance that was over 90%, graduation rate over 90%, until the University of Michigan came in and took it over in 2012. The parents did not ask for their oversight. We did not need any assistance, and we did ask for them to leave. And what I want to explain is that when the school came in, I need you to really think about what school district that you graduated from, or which ones that you may have had children attend. How would you feel if you were approached or asked to come to a meeting and then told at that meeting, oh, we're going to take this great school and make it an excellent one. We're going to take your students to a level that they've never been before. We are going to help them to improve their academics. And so me, being the person that I am, I say, wait a minute, your academics are just fine. We meet AYP every year. We have until they changed the criteria of AYP to include attendance, which took us a little bit under the level. Once that was appealed, our school met AYP again. So they had no reason to come there. At the time of the takeover, Doug Ross, who was a graduate of UM, was the Office of Innovation leader. He came into the school, and if you close your eyes for a minute and just imagine him addressing you. Hi, I'm Doug Ross. I graduated from the University of Michigan. You know, people are saying it's the Harvard of the Midwest. Say no, it's a public university that does pretty well, but we don't need you here in the K through 12. And if you look at your own statistics, 70% of your own attendees graduate. That's way less than DSA. So the university is not improving anything by coming to our school. After the first year of the takeover, our ACT scores dropped. That you can find in the Free Press in June of 2013. The attendance dropped. We lost a lot of teachers. We lost a music tech program. We started the next school year off with a $5 million deficit. That was since the inception of the University of Michigan. Now, I have also attended the Board of Regents at the university, the main campus in Ann Arbor. I also attended the one in Flint. Did you know that Flint for minorities, because the demographics of Flint campus match the demographics of DSA. The graduation rate at the Flint campus is 8% for black students. Are you aware of that? Wow. Is that horrible? And to me, help starts at home. If you're going to fix something, fix your own house first before you take it someplace else. My daughter wanted to stay at the school. I wanted to take her out. She's a swimmer, and they don't have sports at DSA, so we had to do an agreement with King High School, and the principal of King High School is here today, Dr. Jenkins. She and the principal at DSA made an agreement so that my daughter could swim, and she did swim. She made states, and she graduated with a 3.2 grade point average, and most of her class went to college, more than 90%. And so what I need you to do is to really be open when you hear things, because everything that they say is great is not. What our parents were told was that there was a grant awarded by the Knight Foundation for $2.5 million. What the people from the University of Michigan, Dr. Elizabeth Mulgee, Dr. Lester Morgan, Stuart Frankel, who's a real estate mogul, Dr. Glenda Price, who's not from the University of Michigan, but she's part of the board. What they told the parents was that that $2.5 million was to help the students with exposure to the arts. But when the parents researched it, including myself, what we found out was that money was for instruction, for them to funnel the Teach for America people through the school of DSA. So they were not honest with us at all. They didn't believe that we were going to research things and find out the truth. And when we did, we still asked them to leave nicely. We went to the media, because after the first year, they tried to reassign 9 minority teachers and replace them with Teach for America. Teaching is a profession. It is not something that you can roll the dice at and say, oh, I feel like I'm going to go into the classroom today and impress some young people. No, you can't do that. Not with my child. My baby is not for sale, and I don't want any old body coming in and trying to teach them. Not even from the University of Michigan. And so please understand that parents in Detroit, we love our children. We are not going to just allow people to come here and do and say and sell us anything. We are going to research it, we are going to protest it, and we are going to do whatever it takes to get the University of Michigan out of DSA.
Right.
Also, Doug Ross, who graduated from the University of Michigan, was fired from Detroit Public Schools in the 60s for his experimental teaching practices. And that also is on your website. You can look that up. Any questions that you have about the Detroit School of Arts, or parent involvement, teacher shortages, I'll be more than happy to answer those for you. Thank you.
You have another mic? We have two? One.
Yeah.
So one can stay up there and one can...
I'm always so challenged with these mics, and Sam, so terrific. Let me, Asina, I wanted you to capture something that you sort of alluded to in your opening about the dropout rate. And you had a whole sort of sense of the history of dropout, the whole idea of dropouts prior and now. Would you just help us with that?
The United States is one of the few countries in the world that is well, not always, but for a bunch of years sought to educate everybody. But high school graduation was not a general expectation for most of the people who live in the United States. Up until around the 1950s, the term dropout actually did not even exist until sometime in the mid-60s, because people didn't finish high school. People stayed in school long enough to learn to read and write and do basic math, and then they went to work. And when we were primarily an agrarian country, people went back to farm. We're still on that farm schedule where we're off in the summer as if we're going to go pick beans or something, which we did at my school, but apparently I'm looking around, I don't see any bean pickers in here. The whole idea, you're a bean picker. I didn't do, my beans didn't do so well this year. My tomatoes didn't do well either, but we can talk. So the idea that people are going to graduate, one of the most startling things that I learned when I first started paying attention to pregnant and parenting teens, there's this really amazing book that is 30 years old, but still exceptional now, called Private Crisis, Public Cost, and it is about teenage pregnancy by a woman named Kristen Moore. And it is still the same. The statistics have not changed in the 30 years since then. But one of the things that was most surprising to me is that in the 50s, there were more teenage moms than there are now. They were not identified as a problem. They weren't thought of, mostly they got married. Some of you probably never heard the term shotgun wedding, but if you got pregnant before you got married, then your father had a shotgun and made that boy marry you. You had one of those? Yeah. See, we get and one of the reasons it was not considered the same kind of social stigma that it is now is, one, you got married, and two, you formed these viable economic units. But girls summarily they just dropped out of school. What became a problem is when you needed a high school diploma to be able to be successful and to be able to form viable economic units and to be able to support yourself, which you could not do without at least a high school diploma. That's when the issue of being a dropout started to become important in this country. If we went to more internships and more on-the-job training and fewer sit in a room and have somebody, that's a whole different discussion, but we still would not have the same number of dropouts. When people ask about some of the decisions that we made at Catherine Ferguson and some of the things that we did with students, my position was always, at that point, Detroit was losing about 60% of the kids who started in kindergarten did not graduate. So anything that I did, no matter how unusual or unexpected, I wasn't losing 60% of my kids, so I was ahead of the game. But high school completion, I wish I looked this up because I knew you were interested in it. I think that in the mid-50s, barely 40% of the country finished high school. And it may have even been lower than that. But you could get a job, or you could take care of yourself without that. And the reason you're in college, many of you, is because you expect that this time you spend learning is going to help you be able to support yourself and to be able to get a job. Some are just in from the love of learning. I'm happy for you. But generally, we equate schooling with jobs. And education is not always equated with jobs, but schooling is. And I think there are really some differences in those.
I wanted to jump back, Linda, and ask you a question. I thought, could you talk a little bit more about Covington's background?
He was a superintendent, I think, in Pueblo before he went to Kansas City. Yes, and then he went to Kansas City, Missouri, as the superintendent. He was, I think, a social studies teacher. He had, elementary teacher. He had some background in education. But he really did not have a track record for turning around schools. He put in a lot of reforms, as I said before, in Kansas City. But the people in Kansas City were upset because he left. And as I said, he just left in the middle. And without really trying to see whether or not those reforms would come to fruition, and really they did not. Because at the end, as I said, the whole district was unaccredited. And the whole district became unaccredited after he left. Now he's saying that it became unaccredited because he left. But of course that can't be the case because his reforms were still there. And they were trying to see if they could implement them, and the district did lose its accreditation. When Dr. Covington spoke in front of the community, he really didn't have much to say about the kind of curriculum that he would be presenting in the EAA schools. If you read the article in the Metro Times, and you know about the buzz curriculum, where students are supposed to have online learning. But when the new teachers, remember most of these teachers were Teach for America, brand new teachers, just out of college, hadn't had any kind of student teaching or any training, but very passionate and very eager to do what they needed to do. But when they came into the classroom, the bus system was not loaded with curriculum. They had to begin to load it. Well, these teachers and some of the others weren't familiar with curriculum in order to be able to load it in. So they started the year out with no curriculum in the bus. Because they did not want to utilize any of the curriculum that was from DPS, they really didn't have the textbooks or the curriculum. And so they were really winging it. And that is why many of those teachers left before the year was over. So it was an experiment that was almost designed to fail.
Jim Crow.
Yeah, it was, and they called it Jim Crow education. It was designed to fail. And as I said before, I have no problems with reforms. I know that education needs to be reformed. I know there are things that we need to be presenting in front of students that we're not doing. I know there are opportunities that we need to be offering our students that we're not offering them. But we can't just throw anything at students and think that they're going to grab onto it because we want to make a name for ourselves and not because we want to improve the lives of our students. That's just not the way that it works. Now, Dr. Covington pulled the same thing here. He left in June. He left the district. He is no longer the chancellor. He left in June. But that was after there was so much written about him in the paper about his travel expenses and the bus system, and so all of a sudden he said he left to take care of his mom and to become a consultant. And he left us the same way that he left Kansas City, in the middle of what should have been implementation of some reforms. So he was not the right person for the job. He did not bring in anyone with him that had urban experience. Yeah.
Thank you, and I just wanted to follow up some of what you're saying. I'm Elena Herrera, an elected school board member of Detroit Public Schools. I want to thank this incredible panel of educators. When you talk about people who make a name for themselves, despite your reputation precedes you from being an amazing educator from Mumford High School. So many people have talked about being at Mumford when you were there. I wanted to also follow up with saying that the EAA was supposed to revert to Detroit schools when their enrollment dropped. 15 schools were taken from us and we're in terrible debt, and our students are failing, and they have no intention of returning to schools. So we're asking for the support of everybody here to help us get our schools back. We're asking for the support of U of M students to go to the School of Education and tell them to get out of Detroit School for the Arts. Students have the power to do this. Students, you did not have to live with what Detroit students are living with. They would never get to U of M if they continue on the path they're on. They will never get to it. You have the ability, you have the power to make this happen for our students. I'm asking you to go to your Board of Regents, go to your professors, go to everywhere, and tell them, hands off Detroit Public Schools. Yeah. You can do this. Harvard got them out of TFA. Harvard students are no longer doing damage to urban districts. We're asking for U of M to do the same thing. We're asking, in South Africa, it was students around the world that helped to end apartheid. We're asking U of M students to end the apartheid in Detroit Public Schools. Get out of the EAA, get out of anything to do with Detroit Public Schools. We have a right to govern ourselves. Yeah. We can govern ourselves. Please vote for the freedom slate of Detroit Public Schools. Get everybody out of DPS who has no skin in that game. Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question of you, Yolanda. I wanted you to talk about this self-governance, which seems to me like a scam.
A dictatorship?
Well, I don't know. I'm not there, but it just seems like a shell game of some sort of other. Because when you first talked about self-governance, I thought it was self-governance. And it turns out to not be that. So I'm bringing some of these out because I had the pleasure of we actually worked on this panel. We talked about a lot of issues. And I've got such an education from these three women. It's amazing. So I'm trying to bring out some of the points that really I went, oh my gosh, what is that? And self-governance was one of them as it got implemented in DSA.
But what self-governing schools are supposed to do is to allow the school and the community to run itself. It is supposed to work to improve academics and whatever performance is lacking. But remember, DSA was not lacking. It wasn't lacking in attendance, it wasn't lacking in performance, it wasn't lacking in overall academics. And so you have to ask yourself, so why are you here? What is your hidden agenda? Because what you're telling us is not the truth. And so when we uncovered the truth about the Knight Foundation and what the monies were really for, it's a 3-year contract which does not end until 2016. So why are you here? We are still asking that question. The parents were successful in getting 8 of the 9 reassigned teachers back. We were, and on the 9 could have come. He said he could not work under those stressful situations. He had no control, he had no input, felt very restricted. And how can you teach in an environment like that? You have students who are open, who want to learn, who want to be exposed. But you have restrictions so tight on you that you cannot provide any of that instruction to your students. So when they come to you, you're going, I don't know, let me go check with the self-governing board. When the self-governing board first came in, we had an active parent group.
They dismantled that parent group and they took over. Elizabeth Mulgee, Stuart Frankel, Glenda Price, Lester Morgan. There was an attorney from the Knight Foundation who also sat on that governing board. So when we went to the meetings, if I didn't fill out a form and turn it in at the time it was supposed to be turned in, I couldn't address the board. Even if I addressed the board with my concerns, they would not address me or answer me. They would say, we'll get back to you. It was June before I got a response to one of the questions I had in September. The disappointing part of it is that when you have parents who are active, who are knowledgeable, who want to participate, who want to be a part of the process, and you prevent them from doing so, that's not what it's supposed to be about. So then you're coming in to take over, to make the parents pull their students out so that you can do what you want to with the school. This is not a playground. Our children are not for sale. There's a lot of money that the federal government provides to each public school, each charter school, $8,500 per student. Because of the bonds that are owed in Detroit Public Schools, now the EAA doesn't have to pay this back, but there's about $1,100 that each Detroit Public School has to pay to the bonds, and they'll pay that until the year 2039 or something like that. And the state has total control. The emergency managers and self-governing are not responsible, they're not accountable, they're not transparent to the parents, they're only accountable to the governor. That's not how to run a school district. Can you imagine if they took that same program to the Grosse Pointe schools? Would they be able to do that? No. They would never be able to do that. When the EAA was supposed to go outside of DPS, what happened? They shut it down. They were not allowed to expand outside of Detroit Public Schools. Why? Because children other than black and brown children would be affected. And your parents have spoken out and have protested and done whatever. We have too. But our shouts are ignored. Why? Why? I love my children. I want them to have the same thing that you have. But they're not getting it. And then you have to ask yourself why. Self-governing is supposed to improve relationships, not destroy them. The relationship between the administration and the parents has been destroyed. The relationship between the administration and the students has been destroyed. How do you get rid of an art program at the Performing School of the Arts? We just have visual arts now. There's no more drawing, painting, art. That's gone. When the children did their display at the DIA, which they do every year, there was only digital media presented. No sculptures, no drawings, no paintings. But this is with the University of Michigan involved. That's supposed to make it better. Remember, they're the Harvard of the Midwest.
We have a question in the back.
Yes.
Another one of it.
So I'm really interested in this conversation because I feel like I have a lot of touch points with some of the things you're talking about. I'm a high school dropout who later put myself through college and I'm currently in a graduate program. And I was never exposed to charter schools until I moved out west. And it was the first time I'd been exposed to them, and it was a very comfortable exposure. And I still have a very ambivalent relationship with that. So I'm interested to hear, that you also share some of that ambivalence. But I hear that all of you have some very specific, deep knowledge with particular schools. But for myself, I'm very concerned about a more general conversation, which is looking at how Detroit is going in a similar way as New Orleans, and how the public infrastructure is being dismantled and auctioned. And that it's starting, maybe not starting with schools, but certainly that's a key component because it has a legacy ramification for, at least one generation, if not more. So I was just wondering if you would kind of bring the conversation up to talk about that more generally instead of and maybe using the specific examples of your background, but just more talk.
I'd like to address your statement. What you can do as far as looking at the dismantling, not just of New Orleans or Detroit, but look at urban cities across the country. It's not just happening here.
Yes.
So once you destroy a school district, there are land grabs that happen, right? So look at it from a political standpoint. People come to different cities to go to specific school districts. So in Michigan, you hear people say, oh, Rochester has a great school. I would love to live in Rochester. So I'm going to move to Rochester. Imagine if the EAA were to open in Rochester. How many people would flee? And how low would the prices of the property go? Okay, so I'm giving it to you on something you can see. Some people can't see when things happen to Detroit because they don't live here, they're not connected. So I have to give you a visual that you're connected to. Imagine it happening in Ann Arbor. It would never happen. Okay? So all of the urban school districts in Michigan are gone. Detroit is the last one. Detroit was the largest one. It was the largest employer of minority professionals. So not only are you destroying the opportunity for children to go to college, you're killing the black middle class, the black and brown middle class. You're getting land cheap, right? You're taking historical buildings and giving the property or the pieces of those buildings to companies to take someplace else and make money off of. These are the things that are happening in Detroit from a parent perspective.
The other thing is that we talked about Detroit as it relates to New Orleans and the Recovery District. And we're going down that same path with the charter schools. Remember, initially, charter schools were supposed to be developed to do innovative and creative things that regular public schools could not do. But if you look around at most of the charter schools are just mirror images of public schools. And so when you talk about giving options to parents, you're really not giving options to parents. They're really moving from one spot to another spot. They're not getting anything that's any better than what they had before. And so they're using, I think, the charter school movement to, as Yolanda said, in terms of grabbing land and siphoning off children from the Detroit public schools or other public school systems, because as the children leave, so do the resources. And when you have fewer resources, that means you're not able to provide the kind of educational experiences that students need. So if you have one public school and 3 charter schools surrounding that charter school, and everybody is basically doing the same thing but grabbing at the same pot of money, then how are you improving the educational opportunities for students? So to me, everything is by design. There's nothing that's happenstance. The creation of all these charters, it's so easy to start a charter. If you read the series that the Detroit Free Press did on charter schools and how little transparency they have, but parents are flocking to the charter schools because they promise things that they really can't give us. So it is a catch-22 for our students here in Detroit.
We have another question back.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Charlene Ward. I am also a parent, a proud student of Detroit School of Arts. He's a senior this year. Me and my husband actually enrolled our child because of DSA's magnificent reputation for the performing arts in the city, you know. And since Coleman was in his freshman year, there has been new administration at DSA each year. We've had a new principal, whole 9 yards, every single year. And if you don't create stability in a school, then how are you supposed to improve achievement? But I'm saying that to say this. This is my question. given that the special meeting of the Detroit Board of Education, that they voted to oust the emergency manager, and then to turn around the courts decided that he could stay. What's the term for every 18 months you can get a new one? Every 18 months you can get a new one installed. Okay, so this is my question to you. So, and we all know that this system is under Snyder's regime. How do you project the state of DPS under another 4 years of Snyder's regime?
I think that we're not really putting this in the context, a broader context, and that being that the city was taken over. So if you take over the city, well, of course, the school, what is a school district compared to a city? And the part that is most amazing to me is how is it that in the United States, we can disenfranchise whole cities. Detroit is not the only one, but Detroit is the largest one. And there isn't an uproar, national uproar in a democracy when you negate the voting rights and as well as neutralize or emasculate or eviscerate the elected officials that represent those people. So to think about this just about a school district, why not the school district if you're going to take the city? And you know, the thing that I think that it is an economic issue. One of the articles that you were given to read for this, you can read it later, talked about just the actual financial benefit, and that Rupert Murdoch. See, schools have always been, not always, but for the last 50, 60 years, schools have been big business. And if you take out the economic incentive, then you probably don't have very much left. The most money spent in the school is spent on staffing. But right after that is books and textbooks and supplies. And Rupert Murdoch in that article, and I did not follow up and check those sources, but he said 500 billion, am I right with that? There's that's the opportunity in education. So when you look at the dollars and cents, that was part of the impetus to start charters, at least the economic impetus. Now, in Milwaukee, where charters really first started, there was a lot of concern about giving vouchers to kids, giving kids opportunities to go to different kinds of schools in different parts of the state, all around Milwaukee, not just in the city. So the beginning of the charter movement really started in Milwaukee, but got kind of co-opted, I think, in ways that you could not have predicted. And it became a Republican, but not just Republican, it became a conservative movement. The only reason we don't have religious charter schools is because that's the last little bit that we're not willing to give up. Why school is not a religion?
Another question, back.
Yes, my name is Carol, and we're going in the direction that I really came to learn more about. And I don't have a background in economy, but we do have a distinguished economist here, and that is economics. I mean, one thing that has clearly happened, not just in education, but across many areas of life, is to the extent to which our children now have dollar signs on their head. Everything's been monetized. And so I'm trying to understand, if we follow the money, what is it that we need to do to make it work for our children and to make it work for us? So let's go back to the Detroit School of the Arts. I'm trying to understand, was any of the, I think, I'm not an educator, it's called the Foundation Grant or something, Was that foundation grant still going to support Detroit School for the Arts? And then the Knight Foundation gave money to U of M, School of Education?
The grant was written by someone outside of the Detroit School of Arts. The foundation? I'm sorry.
Where public dollars, or tax dollars, or whatever money the school board gets, was it still going to support Detroit School of the Arts?
My granddaughter was a senior at DSA, same year Ms. Peoplesworth, and she was a vocal in the vocal program. They had a tremendous husband and wife teacher there at DSA.
Mr. and Mrs. Malabed.
My granddaughter sang at Carnegie Hall. The school won a national competition and appeared at Carnegie Hall. The Knight grant was some U of M bank account, and we had to come up with the money to get those kids to New York to sing in Carnegie Hall. So I don't know if anything's ever been spent out of that grant, but that grant did not benefit that first year it was there at all. And the other thing about finances, everybody they get a little piece, a little piece, a little piece. Just like in the emergency management with the city is breaking off anything that's revenue producing and giving it to the banks in the name of solving the debt. Well, with DSA, Doug Ross, when he came in, he got 3% of the DSA school budget. And when questioned, could not say what that money went for, or what the purpose was, or who got it ultimately, or in whose pocket it ended up in. But Doug Ross collected 3% of all of the self-governing schools.
There are still grants being written in our children's name, and they are not getting a dime.
And the Knight won't answer.
And the Knight and Sealman Foundation will not be responsible.
Foundations are a huge problem in Detroit public schools. You could have a whole other panel on the malfeasance of the foundations in Detroit.
Right. The Knight Foundation answered a response for funding. What the University of Michigan, Dr. Elizabeth Mulgee, came in and told the parents that the grant was for the students' exposure to the arts. That's what they told us initially. But we're smarter than that. We wanted to see it. They would never give us a copy. So we dug it up and found it. And when we read what the grant was for, it was for instruction. $2.5 million that the university was the fiduciary of, that wasn't coming to the school for exposure. It was for Teach for America. It was to pay for the Teach for America students to come through DSA and occupy classrooms.
What I'm trying to understand is, before U of M got in the picture, where was the money coming from that was funding?
Dr. Denise Cotton had put in place the Friends of DSA. They were a board, and they really helped the administrators. They didn't have a public presence, but they did the fundraising.
But we were still getting public dollars.
State funds, foundation grant, and some supplemental funds that would have, they may have been eligible for some Title I funds.
But the $2.5 million from Knight was more than what we were putting in terms of public dollars?
Yeah.
And that gave them the power?
It was in addition to that, but it's based on student enrollment, so
right.
I'm not sure what the enrollment was, so I can't tell you how much you got in, or how much your Title I funds were.
The enrollment was always less than 700 students. So I'm not sure exactly how that relates to how the dollars are utilized, but that funding was not for the students. It was for instruction.
You know, unfortunately, let me take one more question. It's 8:19, and that bus driver said the group will be there at 8:30, so they're all going to be sleeping at the center. Let me get a question.
Go ahead.
Actually, it's really a comment of an article that I received today. It says 6 effective ways to help DPS students achieve. Dropping out of high school in today's global society is death. Death to prospects for a prosperous future, a decent paying job, a family with an attractive home, and a reliable car that takes vacations and sends its kids to school. A literal death sentence for too many of our young Detroit men who drop out. Roughly half the Detroit children who enter the 9th grade don't earn a high school degree. They drop out. These consequences is a community with no future, no matter who the mayor or the city's deficit reduction plan is. And it mentions the principal and teachers must believe that poor children of color can learn as well as any children. But what I thought, and there's some other points that goes along with this article, but what I found interesting, that this article was written by Doug Ross, and it states that Doug Ross is the founder of the University Prep Charter Schools and Chief Innovation Officer for the Detroit Public Schools. But the fact that he was working in both capacities, that wasn't a conflict of interest.
His high school, University Prep High School, did not meet AWAC. No. He's a billionaire.
Okay, listen, we're going to have to pull this in. This is 8:21, and I wanted to give...
Greg's going to tell the bus driver to leave at 8:40, so we have 10 more minutes.
Oh, man. What luck. Get this lady over here. Yeah, you've had your hand up for quite a bit.
I just want to touch very quickly on some of the points. Let me start here by saying that, for one, I was privileged enough to be kind of a fly on the wall of a conversation between about 8 to 10 businessmen a year ago, right around Father's Day, right here in Midtown, where they were discussing the new residents that would be migrated to Detroit, and how there was an educational issue because they needed to find where they were going to be sending their children to school, which directly has a lot to do with this real estate person that's a part of the administrative process. Also, DPS has gone into the business of property selling. They're not in the business of educating children. And it's very problematic because as these gentlemen sat there, they said, well, we can't send them to Detroit Public Schools because it's too dangerous. So once I realized they were talking about DPS schools, I turned my chair around like I was a part of the meeting too. It was a public restaurant. And they also said that they had to find a way to create a process of elimination so that they did not have to accept all Detroit resident school students. So now we have several schools that have been built in the last few years with DPS money, with our tax dollars, that many of them have been taken over. And I see in the future a whole different picture and reason why these buildings and why they have their teeth and their mouths watering over buildings like DSA, Renaissance High School, the new Mumford School, and several other buildings here in Detroit. If you go around Detroit and you really look at some of the DPS schools that have closed, DPS cares so little about the property and about even the morale of the children and residents in the neighborhood where these buildings exist. They're just fenced in with trees and weeds growing up all around them, while they're manicuring the with a fine-tooth comb certain areas of Detroit right now. I see people cleaning up everywhere, but no one is cleaning up our schools. No one is opening up or talking about our rec centers. No one is talking about children's programs, employment programs for summer youth. And unless you're talking about creating a situation where we have something for these children to do and we have an education that is actually working on their behalf, this is all a part of the highway to prisons for profit. That's what this is all about. And regentrification, when you look up the definition of regentrification, you will see exactly what is happening to urban cities all over this country right now. Public education is under attack all over this country. And my child, our children, are paying the price for that. But I understand. I'm not afraid to call a spade a spade. I understand that the education of African American children and the deficiency of our education has always been a big investment for America. Because the more we don't know, the better it is for America. And at a time when we're looking at what is happening with our children all over this country, our young black males being shot down in the street, and no one is talking about it, no one is saying anything about it, how do you think the emotional and intellectual stability of our children is right now? How our children feel like we are under fire on every level, educational, residential, law. It has gotten utterly ridiculous. Last year, I took my daughter out of a charter school that I sought out after DPS was being dismantled brick by brick. And I felt torn because I felt like, okay, well, I'm going to take my child somewhere where they can get the programs that they've taken out of DPS. And then I go and I find out that I've got problems here at the charter school because they're not teaching my child effectively either. So now my children are back at DPS. I have 2 students at DSA. My daughter, who I took out of school last year, out of the charter school, and I chose to homeschool her because I felt I had no choice. I felt I had nowhere to take her where she would be effectively ready for high school upon her freshman year. So I homeschooled her. She's now a student at DSA. The beginning of the school year, we were informed that there were supposed to be 43 students per classroom, which is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot possibly effectively teach 43 children in a classroom. After some waves being made, we were promised that that would not happen. However, at about the 2nd or 3rd week of school, my daughter called me from her biology class. As I'm talking to her biology teacher, it sounds like she's at a festival. So I asked her, where are you located at the moment? She said, I'm in my classroom. I said, how many students do you have? I was very disappointed and appalled to find out that there were 47 kids in her classroom. I left my job. I have run a business myself. I left my work that day and made it up to the school to talk to Mr. Hedger about what was going on and why were there 47 kids in my daughter's biology class. Oh, he got on the phone, he got to calling Ms. Pryzak, he got to calling a couple of other people who promised that in the next couple of days they were working to get those numbers down and they'd have those numbers down. And as a people and as a community, we have to realize where our power lies. So when I asked, will it be down by count day? Because the count day is when they get all that money for each one of those students. And we have to realize that we have a voice. They've taken the voice from the public servants, our teachers, our police officers, our firemen, through all of this, collective bargaining, for them squashing that. They have taken the power away from our public servants to fight for what they need and for what is right, for the services that they need to provide to our children and community. So we as parents and a community, we have no choice, and we should not even be able to look our children in the face if we do not get up and stand up and deal with what's going on in the city, because we have the numbers. We may not have what you think is the money, but we do have the money, because if all of our children leave DPS schools, if we divest financially from the support of many businesses, we could literally bring the city to a standstill in a matter of 24 hours. But we have to be willing and know that when we stand together, we're standing for our children. They are looking at a world right now where they are under attack, and they need to see and know that we are here to defend them and to protect their future.
Okay, it's 8:30, and I want to ask each panelist to say what they would do if they could wave that magic wand, what they would do, and then we're going to have to cut it off so our students can get to the bus.
Okay, as a superintendent, what I would do is reinstate the schools and the specific programming that they had. We had, at Northwestern Ontario, that Benjamin Davis had an airplane mechanics program, and children could graduate from high school with their pilot's license. So there are so many gems within the Detroit Public School System. You only hear about the negative things, and those things are not the truth. And what I would have to do is do a real campaign about what's actually available in Detroit Public Schools, and the monies will follow.
I think that we need to do innovative things and not the same old thing. And I know it's going to be heresy, but I used to teach a Bates Academy, which was called Bates Academy for the Gifted and Talented. And I had 50 kids in my classroom. But I didn't try to teach 50 kids in the same way you teach 20 kids. And I think that you never need to have that many. But now, 2 periods after that, I had 7 kids. But at Bates, we let kids do their own schedules, and so that's how it came out. But I think that we continue to use the old models and not think about some of the new ways and newer techniques, newer approaches. I also would make all high schools single gender, which means I'd probably be dead in an hour. But a good bit of the violence and the fights and posturing come because boys are trying to impress girls and girls are trying to get boys' eyes. And if you put them in different schools, and we know that single gender education is much better for girls at least. I know for sure for girls. I can't really remember whether it's better for boys or not.
Yes, it's better for boys.
There you go. So the first thing I would do is make sure that every student had to have some out-of-school learning experience, not just that 20 hours, but an internship at least once, if not one every year, because you can't keep trying to learn everything in a building. You just can't do it. Teachers can't keep up. Technology changes too fast. Techniques change too fast. I don't know if I want to be an architect until I spend a day or a year or 6 months working with a real architect. I don't even know what architects do. I'm first generation college. And for my family, I could not believe there was something called graduate school when I got to undergraduate school. You mean I still have to get good grades again? So, you want to give kids opportunities whose families may not be able to give it to them, but schools are supposed to be able to do that. And for many, many years, that was how education worked in this country, even under separate but unequal. Because I, as a black teacher, cared about my kids as much as white teachers cared about their kids and gave as many of the opportunities as were available at that time for students. So I think that we need to just rethink education. And if it weren't just heresy, I'd say just shut it all down for some time so that you're not trying to fly the plane while you're repairing the plane. Or at least shut a few down. Fix that, then go there. But, I was an art teacher.
If I had a magic wand, it would have to be have a lot of voltage, because I would want to have our society and our community value education as by their deeds and not just by their words. I think we all know there's been enough research. We know what works, what can work. We know what we need to do in order to educate children. There have been so many studies, so much research, so many places where things have worked. But as a community and as a society, we talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. So if I had a magic wand, I would want everyone to put education as their top priority and work towards educating. We say that every child can learn, and I think they can, given the right time and the right experiences. But I don't think that many of us take that seriously. So that would be my thing. We have to make education a priority in this country, and frankly, it is not.
Thank you very much for doing such an able job with this incredibly difficult subject. Listen, everybody.